Welcome to Women Don't Do That, where we empower you with inspiration, knowledge, and skills to redefine your boundaries and unleash your potential. I'm Stephanie Minton, founder and CEO of Beacon North Strategies and your guide. Small town girl turned CEO while navigating career, motherhood, ADHD, and chronic migraines. Our conversations range from interviews with visionary women to solo episodes filled with actionable insights. We are your hub for turning what ifs into let's go. Are you ready to redefine your possible? Let's get started. Camryn Rodgers is a trailblazing Olympic and world champion hammer thrower who has shattered records and barriers in her sport. From dominating the NCAA to making history on the world stage, she's proving that women do belong at the top. In this episode, Camryn shares her journey, the mindset behind her elite performance, and what it takes to break through in this male-dominated sport. Whether you're chasing big goals or looking for inspiration, this conversation is one you won't want to miss. Welcome, Camryn.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, so nice to see you. I
You as
want to
well.
start by getting to know you better for the listeners who don't know you. So, what does life look like for you right now?
So right now is kind of it's sort of an in-between time of year, I think, if
Mm,
I'm being honest. So we are far past our off season. So let me first clarify. I finished last year with the Olympic Games. That was in early August. I had about 3 weeks off completely, which I think you definitely need. You definitely need some time when you finish your season just to physically, mentally recoup. We got back into training, easing into it slowly. And now we're sort of getting into a heavier sort of training load. But
Okay.
we still have a couple months off from the start of season. So right now is sort of the foundation has been laid. We're building upon it. I'm starting to get ready for more explosive types of training for when my season starts in April, May, because we have world championships this year in Tokyo. So there is a lot to look forward to. I'm especially excited because when I was in Tokyo for the Olympics in 2021, it was a very different sort of atmosphere with, the country going into lockdown 2 weeks before for
Mm,
COVID, the restrictions. I think that the Japanese Olympic Committee put on the very best games that they could with the
mm.
circumstances. But I'm excited to go back to have my family there this time. There is so much to look forward to, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. Training away, um, starting actually a new sort of job internship soon, which would be fun, and just enjoying my time and making the most of my weekends right now of not doing anything. Like I'm going to a concert this weekend, that'll be fun, but that's kind of where I'm at.
I love that because I'm sure when you're really in it, it's hard to probably do some of those other things.
Yeah.
When you look at what motivates you, what would you say motivates you to live your best life?
Ooh, that's a good question. From the very start too, we're starting strong. I think for myself, like I think sometimes when you are living your life every single day, you get so, I guess, wrapped up in all the things that you're working towards. It can be so hard to sort of reflect on how much you've changed and grown over time. And I think
Mm,
sometimes it's important for me to remember that I am living the life that my 12-year-old self had only dreamed of when she had just started track. And I think
right.
there's so much that I do kind of for her and for other girls and young women who are coming up in sport. Someone once told me that they found it really interesting and kind of weird, but more interesting that I started to throw. I started track, which was my first and only sport ever, at an age where most girls are dropping out of sport. And I
Right.
think to see how much throwing and hammer has changed my life, and I don't know, like, I don't know where I would be without it, and so I think I try to live every day in a way to make my younger self proud and
Mm,
to kind of make sure that I'm doing as much as I can, I don't know, making the most of the entire experience because it's I think very rare that you get to find something that you love so much and that you're
Mhm.
passionate about sort of right from the get-go. So,
Yes,
I try to make the most of it and for the people who've supported me as well, especially like my mom. So,
right.
yeah. Yeah.
When you think about, when you first got into hammer throw,
Mhm.
I have to tell you, Cameron, this is really
Yeah.
funny. Every time I see hammer, all I can think of is hammerhead shark. Like, every time, that's what runs through my head. And in my head, I'm going,
I love it.
"You're so immature." Like, I like
Not at all.
like,
That
"Hammerhead,
should be our new
hammerhead."
mascot.
Yeah. Oh, that would be great. Okay. So what I was gonna ask you is what drew you into the sport? Like, how did you even find this sport?
Okay, so funny enough, having just mentioned my mom. So my mom is a hairdresser. She has a lot of friends and clients, and a few of them were in the track club that I joined that I'm a part of at home. And so they were telling me for like a little while, like, you should come out, you should try like running, like, see if you like it, meet some people. And for a long time, I was like, oh, it's okay. Like, I don't really run much. And, like, thank you so much. But, maybe one day. And I finally sort of, I guess, got the courage to go to my first practice, January 5th, 2012. I will always remember the day. And
Hmm.
were decided to go like 15 minutes before the first practice of the new year. So it was very last minute. I might not have gone. Things might have turned out very differently. But my mom and I went, and the very first person I ended up meeting that day was my first throws coach. And
Oh.
so, which I feel like was very lucky because he brought me over to the practice. I got to see everybody train, and then he kind of put a hammer in my hands and was like, "Okay, your turn. Try to throw this hammer now." I was like, "This seems dangerous." But I threw it and it went like 2 meters, and he, like, looked at me and just sort of said, "I think we can work with that." And so that's sort of where that's sort of where that whole adventure came from. But it's kinda wild to think back that things just
Hmm.
if I hadn't gone, like, things would have turned
Yeah.
out so differently. And if I had met someone else, like maybe the head sprints coach, that it also could have been a very different result. I think I got so lucky in a lot of ways that first day that I went there to meet my first coach and sort of fall in love with the sport that 20 minutes prior I had never even heard of before.
Right.
So, it
And did
was
you
a
love
very
it from the first throw? Like, were you like, I love this?
I did, and
Oh,
I
that's so special.
especially it is, it was kind of like it's kinda like we connected in a way. Like, I connected with the hammer, and I think for myself, like, as a 12-year-old who is, like who's young, who's growing up, who's finding themselves as much as they can at 12 years old, it was the first time in my life that I had ever really felt empowered, was
Mm.
throwing this hammer, and it was this unusual sort of feeling that I never wanted to end. And
Mm.
I think being able to feel so powerful and so confident doing this activity and sort of honing my skills and training myself to be really good at it was something that I just never had the chance to experience before. And a lot of that was just because my mom and I were commuting every day, like an hour each way for her to go to
Mhm.
work, for me to go to school. And then that first year, second year? Second year? I think it was my second year of throwing was when my mom ended up having to sell our apartment at the time, and we were couch surfing and sleeping in our car,
Mm.
and we faced housing insecurity that first year or second year. And so I think I really leaned heavily on throwing and my teammates and my coach just because it was a constant that I had in my life and it was sort of an outlet. And I think I understood the deep sort of emotional, I guess, growth and help and an appreciation for the sport in a way just hadn't prior.
Mhm.
And so I think those first few years were very formative in my throwing career for a lot of reasons.
Right.
But That's kind of it. A lot of reasons that I sort of threw out there right
Right,
away.
right. Well, it's so interesting because I feel like with sport, people don't analyze it enough, their own experiences, but for so many, it gets them through really difficult and challenging times, right? And gives an outlet or gives a safe and healthy place to go with safe adults, or um, it can be so important in someone's life.
I totally agree.
Mhm,
And I think after experiencing that myself, it's sort of astounding to me how much, one I guess you could say one hammer can make a difference in someone's life, but that's because it's never really just the hammer at the same
mhm,
time. It's the
mhm.
community you build, it's the support network you have, it's no, there's just so much more, I guess, to a sport than the physicality of it, and
Yeah,
that's something that I think I've learned more and more over the years, like, moving through high school and then ultimately going through college and moving to the States and training here, and whole different world, but one that I think really sort of opened up for me those first couple years, I guess,
right.
of growing.
When did you realize, or what's the process of realizing that you're actually good at this and, it's worth really putting in a lot of time and effort? How did that happen?
I think for myself, so for those first couple years, I was doing a lot of different events, but Hammer was always the one that I loved the most, and it's, like, a very unusual event. It's one that not a lot of people start out in. I was very lucky that it was sort of the first event that I did, and it's also an event that, I think, like many others, of course, takes a lot of time, but it's such a delicate balance in hammer throw of explosiveness, with elasticity, with technique, with, I guess, a sort of finesse, if you will, and power that I think for those first few years was just sort of figuring out the movement and the rhythm
Mhm.
and your connection to it, and I think when I was around 15, so maybe 3 years after I'd started, 15, my coach at the time, Richard had sort of started mentioning to my mom and I, like, "Hey, like, there is a chance that, like, you work hard enough, you dedicate yourself, you focus, like, I've had athletes go to the States and go to college, and throw
Mhm.
hammer, and this is something that you could do," and it was one of those could I do this? Like, could I make this
Mhm.
happen? And I think working towards that goal over the next, I guess, 3 years of my high school experience, definitely made me push a
Mhm.
lot more, and I think being able to grow in the sport and, um, I don't know, in a way, like, discover lots more about myself too, and sort of, I guess, bring those skills that I learned in sport into school. Like, there was so much that was, like, going on, but when I made my first national team, I think is where I was kind of like, "I think I could really do this," and it was my U20, so my junior world championships in 2016. I was in Poland. I was in Bydgoszcz, Poland, which I've actually been back to since then to compete my first pro year, which was super fun,
Oh.
but even though that first year I did not compete super well, I was like a nervous wreck out there on the competition field, but representing Canada and I guess feeling the honor of wearing your country's singlet jersey and having the country name like across your chest, like it was the sort of surreal feeling where I was like, okay, like I've reached this one milestone, but I need to continue, like, I need to see how far I can go in this. So that was
Right,
kind of I think where that sort of excitement really started taking root in me just wanting to discover, I guess, truly my potential in it, and
right.
the year I started throwing actually was the year of the London 2012 Olympics, and so watching our Canadian athletes throw at those games in London I think
Mhm.
was one of the first sort of, "Wow, this sport's really amazing, and I would love to be there one day," and then being able to make my first national team was sort of a, "I'm on my way, I'm getting
Yes.
there," and then I think I actually finally believed it, to be honest. I
Yes.
think I finally believed that when I won my first NCAA championships in
Mm,
2019 and qualified for Worlds that year, and that was sort of the first, moment of, "Oh my god, wait, I could actually do this." So
right.
it's an
Yeah.
interesting sort of, I guess, trajectory there,
Yes.
but
I think it's also part of that story of not giving up, right? I think people look at athletes like you and look at Olympic champions and think, oh, they've always been that good. And like you talking about your first competition there in Poland and how it didn't go the best. And yet you think about how far you've come and that tenacity that you have, right? I get told that a lot, like that I'm very tenacious, and I think I partially probably would credit that to sport for myself. Obviously, as an amateur athlete, not an Olympian, but I remember my first gymnastics competition was awful, like so bad. I think I spun around the bar like twice instead of once, like just all kinds of things that would probably make other people laugh if they saw me. And then
gymnastics is
later,
hard.
yeah, later in my gymnastics career, like still, at not at a senior competitive level, but was in my category always kind of first. But the years that it took and the dedication and the embarrassment you have to overcome from those first experiences, it's such an important lesson for people, I think for women listening to keep going, right? Like whether it's like a job interview or a new career you really want to try and it's really hard, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just sometimes takes time and effort and practice.
I could not agree with you more, and in fact, I think there is a gosh, I don't know where exactly this quote came from, but I think that I've heard before that, as an athlete, and of course, it can extend to people who are not athletes as well, but, I think there's one sort of quote that goes, "As an athlete, you have to have long-term goals and a short-term memory."
Mm-hmm.
So, even when it comes to the things that go right, because you have to be able to learn from the experience regardless of whether it went how you're hoping it would or
Yeah,
whether it maybe didn't go as planned, you have to learn what happened and what that process looked like and what you can take from it moving forward to be better
right.
next time, and all of that works you towards these goals that you have down the line and in the future for yourself, and I think that's an important part of any process in which you are trying
Yes.
to get better.
Yeah, I think about this a lot in terms of business, a business owner, and I think this is a hard one for women in particular too, is that you need to change your perception of failure, right? Like it's all a learning process. And when you talk about people like yourself or others or people who own, multi-million dollar businesses, they had those 10 businesses before that failed, right? And
Yeah.
it's part of it's from from what I hear from people who do great things, it's the people who get up and keep going that are able to get there. It's when
Mhm.
you stop yourself and you give up, that you've
Yeah.
kind of ended the race, right? The fall courses of the Beacon North Mentorship Academy are here. Join us to boost your advocacy, communication, and media skills. Whether you're new to lobbying or a seasoned advocate, we've got something for everyone. Check out the schedule and secure your spot today. Link in bio for details. I wanted to ask you about training for the Olympics. How
Mm.
do you do that? What does kind of like a typical training week look like when you're in the throes of it?
Okay, so what I actually have found to be kind of funny is our approach to Paris this year was very, very similar to our approach um, to Tokyo, actually, in 2021. And I think in a lot of ways it's good. Like, I think one really great thing about my coach is that if something is working, he will note that and we will keep doing that thing. It's like, don't change what isn't broken sort of
Mhm.
mentality. But
Right.
we've worked for so long to I guess, really narrow down our approach and our process of, I guess, building up towards a competition and an entire season. Like, we don't just look at one competition. We look at the
Right.
season leading up to it. We look at what our objectives are for that whole year. And we'll even look years out in advance. Like, okay, so we have LA coming out in 2028. What did we do this time around that didn't work? What did we do in 21 that did work? How do we want to approach the next 2 years leading up to
Mhm.
that? And that's sort of what we did for Paris too. So we looked at previous years, seeing what went well, what didn't work, what meets were good, when was I peaking well in my training blocks? How was I feeling? Was I ever tired? What caused these injuries? And we sort of analyze all of this, I guess, data and come back and form a plan. And basically we just get to throwing, and so I train twice a day for throws. So I throw in the morning and in the afternoon, and then I lift. And that's sort of our, I guess, our schedule, 4 days a week, which isn't too bad. I think, I like having it sort of a 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, weekend sort of style, which is good. It makes for a lot of recovery, which I think is important, especially in a sport that is so focused on, like, power output
Right.
and strength building. So that's what's worked for me. We've done it for 8 years. So
Well, it's
that's
definitely working. Don't
I
fix what's not broken, right? That's another, yeah.
exactly. So that's sort of what that looks like, but we always like to have certain meets that we target to really throw far at, just to get used to a high power, high explosivity sort of feelings and connection in the throw. There's I don't know, I think that's kind of what we look at. And then of
Right.
course work it in with nationals, look at how we want to approach the lead up to a major championship, whether that's going to a training camp or whether we should stay here and just keep sort of pushing and pushing to the last minute till we have to go. So that part's looked a little different every year, but the sort of foundation of it stays the same. But it's the day in, day out work that sets everything up. Like, you have to commit yourself every single day to being very present every single throw, working even when you're very tired. However, I think we've gotten to a point where rest is starting to become a little more important now, so that part's been very nice. We
A
don't
little
take,
bit more balance.
a little bit more balance, balance in the way we feel is a balance, so
Right.
yes.
One thing that was really interesting I found about this Olympics is with so many more athletes on social media,
Mhm.
was seeing more and learning more about how the Olympics actually works, like that you don't stay in the Olympic Village the whole time and like all these like really interesting things and that you leave and then you come back for the closing ceremony, right?
Yep. Well,
And all
it's
kinds of
yeah,
things.
yeah, it's definitely a funny sort of, setup, I think, that the Olympics has, and one that it's maintained now for, I guess, quite a few Olympic cycles. But no, you're absolutely right. So with the village, it's funny. So I think we got to the village on July 30th. Like, we flew into Paris, got into the village on July 30th, and I competed on August 4th and 6th. So I was only in Paris for about 5 days leading up to my competition. And before that, we were doing our training camp in Sweden for about 9, 10 days. So most of my trip was spent, like, preparing for the Olympics in Sweden, which actually worked out very well. It was a great training environment, had a great time. But yeah, we got to the village, we checked in, we got our Olympic phones with all of the transit passes and safety, security
Mm,
sort of, programs that they had built into it that everyone gets, which is very nice. I will say, being at the Olympics, walking around Paris, I felt so safe. Like, they had police officers and, like, military SWAT members on every corner
it's
of the city around it.
It's so interesting, especially being a Canadian, because you like never see things like that. I remember when I was in university, I got to go to the APEC summit, as a
Oh,
youth
no
delegate with
way.
all the world leaders. Like, yeah, I got to,
That's the coolest experience. What?
yeah, like, it was insane. The president of China, Putin, like all of them. Bush was there, and
That's you're such a legend.
there was
What the
machine
heck?
guns with like massive groups of people, like police officers or military people on every corner. And being Canadian, I was like, what is happening? Like, this is just so I can imagine
Yes.
what your experience was like. How did you find your cardboard bed?
It was actually and I found this in Tokyo too, I liked it, like, it was pretty comfy cozy, and I think that there's those cardboard beds catch so much flack, and I think people just get used to their own beds at home, and,
So
the cardboard
true.
beds are I don't know, like, they have to do what they can to support 10,000 athletes coming in and out of the village in the
Right.
span of, like, 4 weeks?
Yeah, there's only so much you
Um
can do.
Exactly, but those beds actually were not bad, and I think I remember them having at least the mattresses, like, you could go and look at them, like, up close in one of the other buildings that they constructed at the village in Tokyo, but here, it was fine. I think the thing that made the biggest difference, honestly, low key, the difference between life and death was that Athletics Canada, or I guess Team Canada brought in air conditioning units
Yeah.
for us in our building and then had like things to put over the windows for shade because it was so humid and it was so hot in Paris during
Yes.
the summer. They always bring
Yeah.
electrolytes and there's always just so much that they do to keep us like
Right.
cool and
I
ready to
I
go.
can't even imagine, Cameron, how hot, because I kind of, I guess I feel like I made a mistake. I went to my first ever trip to Europe in August of this year. I went to Italy with my husband. Yeah, it was our 40th birthdays and our 15-year wedding anniversary. But we
Oh.
almost died from the heat. And
Mhm.
I remember thinking about
Yeah.
The Olympians at the time, being like, they must be dying. So when I was seeing all this stuff about the air conditioning, I'm like, oh, I feel you. I can barely walk around.
It is hot. Europe gets spicy in the summer, so and I
Yes.
know you know exactly. You felt that. My family and I traveled around after, so we were in Italy too, and it was also blaring hot. And
Oh my
I
goodness.
love Europe. I love Europe in the summer, love Italy, but it gets really hot at some points where you're
Mhm.
like, I think we just need to take this day as calm and as cold as we can.
And a
Like we're
good
going
hotel with really good air conditioning.
yes, just
Yeah.
just to
Yeah.
recover.
Oh my
But
goodness.
yeah, it was definitely very hot, very humid. But I think one nice thing that they always do at every Olympics is they always have uh sort of those containers with tons of like electrolytes and water bottles ready for all the
Oh,
athletes
nice.
and all the training venues. Like they do a lot to make sure that you're okay, which
Yeah.
is
Oh, that's great. So
yeah.
you go to the Olympics, you win the gold medal.
Mhm.
How do
Wild.
you celebrate that? What did you do? What does that look like?
Oh man. So okay,
I
I
was
think
like, do you want to say?
so I think so I think what I really actually want to, I guess, walk you through is the process of what winning the like winning an Olympic medal looks like and getting on
Yeah.
the podium because it takes a long time after the competition ends. So I think I finished competing at around 9:30. So, finished competing, I had, like, a baby breakdown in the circle and started crying, and then I walked out, saw all the other competitors, and I'll just quickly add right now, I think we're at a really amazing point in women's hammer throw right now where all of the women who are competing are, like, the best women that you could ever want, competing alongside you, which is quite amazing, especially considering that women's hammer's only been in the Olympics since the year 2000.
Right.
So, it's grown so much in a very short period of time, but the athletes and the women who are part of it are incredible. I was hugging all of them afterwards, they were hugging me, we were all celebrating. I sprinted over to my coach and, our head coach too, here at Cal was there, so I hugged her,
Aw.
I hugged my trainer, my physio, who had come with me, and then I ran over to my family, was hugging them, and one of my best friends who had flown out too. rung the big bell that they had, which I later learned they're putting in the Notre Dame, which was so like super fun. That bell that all the track
Wow.
athletes were ringing, they're hanging it up in the Notre Dame.
Oh,
So fun.
that's so fun.
Yeah, so did that. You do a victory lap. They bring you, and then they like put the medal on you as you're doing it, so you can like wave to everyone, which is super fun. And then you go sort of to the underground area underneath the stands. They take the medal back. Because you finish your victory lap, you go through all your interviews, and then you go down, and they're like, okay, we need to get this back, and then we can present it to you on
Yeah,
the
so they don't
podium.
show that part of you doing the victory
No.
lap with the medal.
Oh, yeah. So everyone does it, everyone who makes like places top three. So yeah, you do your victory lap, you go through all your like interviews where you're weaving up through the stands, talking to all of the journalists and the interviewers, which is fun. And at this point, I know so many of them, so we're like, hey Cal, like hi
Is
guys.
it is it Darren? Who are the interviewers from Canada? Are there a
Ooh,
lot of them?
oh gosh, there's quite a few because they'll have
Okay,
different networks who are
right.
all set up there on the sort of like terrace
Oh,
that
I was
they've
gonna say I meant Devon.
Devin
So
Haru.
Devon, you're also going to laugh at this, but that organization that I went to Asia with,
Hmm.
Devon was also involved in it. So we've met before
Oh,
through
way.
that organization. And I don't remember if he went on a mission with me or not, but yeah, every time I see him, that's what I remember.
That's so funny though. And what
I
a
know.
small world.
The world
Also,
is a small place.
it all Canadians know each other.
Yeah, yeah.
That's so cool though. And
Yeah.
isn't he just like the loveliest person?
Yes, and he's so like he's so good. He's so good.
He
I
is.
really enjoyed watching his Twitter and especially when you're if you're working or something, right? Like you get
True.
all the updates.
You do.
Um
So good.
yeah, okay, so you do the interviews.
You do the interviews, they take you underneath, they take the medal back so they can bring you out on the podium. They present it to you again. You kind of like have a fun little moment. You like wave to your family. You're like, "Hey guys." And then they take you back through in case there's I think we did one more interview afterwards if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, but you do that. Either way, you finally get released. Except that they came up to me and they were like, "Hey, you got to get drug tested." I was like, "Okay, good." So we get drug tested. They gave me my phone back so I can call my coach, and I was like, "Hey, yay for us! Also, can you chat with Liz, my physio, so she can come get like to the testing with me?" So I think I finally was able to exit the stadium at like 1:30 in the morning.
Wow. Do they
One
drug test everyone or is that random?
It's random.
Mm.
I think all the winners get tested. I think maybe one more podium place probably gets tested. Likelihood is high, and then for all the other finalists, it's more up in the air. But yeah, so there are people who are always getting tested, like the winners, I think another podium person, and probably one or two other people from the final. So it was busy, but I just remember Liz and I like sitting in the testing area, like the waiting area, holding my medal and just kind of like giggling. Because like what else are you supposed to do?
Yeah,
Like
it's
you're
like
just
you're
at the
supposed to be out
Olympics.
celebrating and you're like, I am waiting to see if I'm disqualified.
I you're waiting to pee in a cup and you're just and it's so late and still had like the Red Bull running through my system, so we're just sitting there giggling and it was like the most surreal feeling, but got out of there, got back to the village, and my whole family was waiting there for me. Like
Oh,
everyone who'd come out. And so we got to hang out for a while, take pictures, catch up. It was so fun. And then I think afterwards I got into my room, sort of laid down on my bed for a second. It was like, I'm definitely not sleeping. So I just started FaceTiming my friend.
yeah, you're like, this is just not happening.
It's not. It's not. So did
And it's a
that and
once in a lifetime opportunity.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so I'd FaceTime them and they'd answer and they'd be like, and we'd just be screaming on the phone together.
Oh,
Which is fun. I think one of my friends has a picture of me like on FaceTime. I look so tired, but I'm also like so happy
oh my gosh, I
holding up
love
my
that.
medal. And then those first couple days after, the day after for me was Canada House interviews, which was fun. I got to do the Champions Walk by the Eiffel Tower, which was
Oh
so
yeah.
funny because that was the first time I'd actually been in Paris. Was on that Champions Walk. So yeah, but the Eiffel Tower piece being in the middle, I always like to laugh because I like touched the Eiffel Tower before I saw the Eiffel Tower, and everyone goes, "What do you mean?"
Oh, that's
But
funny.
yeah, so that's kind of what the first I guess that's sort of what that looks like. You have those first few days afterwards. You have about 72 hours, so you have to leave the village. So there's a lot that goes on in those like 2 to 3 days, and you just get to make the most of it. Yeah, and then afterwards, I just went and stayed with my family, and we went on vacation afterwards around Europe.
Very nice. How long do people stay in like Hammer? Like what's kind of the life cycle of an athlete there?
So typically, a hammer thrower, a women's hammer thrower will peak around their late 20s.
I'm too
Late
old. You
20s.
telling me I'm too old? I'm just kidding.
It's never too old. Never too old. You let me know and we'll hammer throw together,
I
Stephanie.
might I
It
might
will be
have some
incredible.
kids for you though. I can maybe give you some kids.
Please. The more
Yeah.
people at hammer throw we can get, the better.
Yeah. Well, actually, one
But
of Rochelle's friends is good at shot put, so maybe.
ooh.
Yeah,
Could you
if
give me a shot
they
putter?
might come home from school soon. If they do, I'll well by three. We'll see if we're still on the phone, but you can say hi to them
Okay.
if they're here. They'd probably love that.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I would love that too. But yeah, so like late 20s, I think a lot of women will retire in their early 30s
Mhm.
approximately. But yeah, you could keep competing for I think a while. Like the current world record holder, Anita Lidarchik, is still competing. She's 38, 39.
Wow.
She came fourth in Paris, so she won the Olympics. She won the last three Olympics. She came fourth in this Olympic Games, and she's still throwing pretty dang far. So
Yeah, fourth.
amazing.
Wow.
So yeah, hammer throw is a cool event because you can keep doing it for a long time. You stay healthy and
Yeah,
you train smart
right.
and
It's not like gymnastics where you age out at like 16 or
a little different, which is
yeah.
also crazy to me that
Yeah,
especially knowing some of the gymnasts that come through for college, right? I'll see them and
right.
they're like, "Yeah, I'm here." And then once I retire, like once I finish and graduate, I'm done. Like
Yeah,
that's wild. You're like
it
21,
is.
22,
Yeah.
but
I
yeah.
remember you'll kind of laugh at this probably, but when I was pregnant with my oldest, I
Mhm.
was taking trampoline classes and I loved
That's so
it.
fun.
Yeah, because you start to be you can't train the same, right? Like when you're an adult and you're working full time and all this business. And so you can't stay in shape enough to do your sport at a high level. But what I liked about trampoline is because it's just very different, I was still getting better versus like gymnastics where you're starting to get worse and start to hurt yourself because you're not training as much anymore. However, so I got pregnant and I went to see my doctor and I was like, "Can I still do trampoline?" They were like, "No." Like
No.
I was pretty young and they're like, I think I was like your age and they're like this your center of gravity is like changing every day. Like you can't do that anymore. And I was like, "Okay."
No, I'm sorry. That's wild though. I love how you're just like, can I still trampoline? And they
Yeah,
said,
yeah. What do you mean? No, I can't just be doing flips. I don't understand. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
that's
Anyways,
so
it's pretty
good.
funny.
So good.
Um, so one of the things I want to ask you is, and I think this is important for women listening, because one thing about women is we're always doing lots of things, right? So when
And I
you're
love that.
balancing like your training regime, you have multiple degrees, you went to school at the same time. How did
Mhm.
you kind of manage those pieces or like time management, work-life balance? Like, how do you make that work?
I think that is a fantastic question and one that I honestly feel like I'm still figuring out because
Mm,
life changes and what we do
yeah,
in our lives day to day changes as well. And so I think my life now looks extremely different than it did my freshman year, looks different than when it did my sixth and final year when I was
right,
competing in school. And now entering my third year professionally, I think that it's very different. I'm someone who always likes to stay busy. I like to always be doing something. I don't like to
right.
rest. So I think last year I was working as a special education advocate, This year, I'm about to start interning with our compliance office here at school, which should be fun, learning more about sports policy and different laws taking effect, how that impacts athletes, which is good. See if it's an area I'm interested in because would I'm planning on going to law school like
Mhm,
whenever I finish throwing. And training day in, day out, I just love having so many things to do and work on. And so
mhm.
for myself, I think the biggest hurdle I've had to overcome is procrastination, to be honest. I think mostly though, as an athlete, it was mostly me being very tired and being like, okay, I can finish this later, and then having to be like, okay, no, I actually have to do this now. But it's something that you figure out over time. You figure out how you operate. Very similar to, I
Yes.
guess, what my coach did for me when, in terms of training and competing and how I like to be when I'm in my competitive zone. But you figure out how you operate. You figure out like what your body responds to, what are some good like motivators for yourself, what really gets you up and going. And at the end of the day, it's remembering why you're doing what you're doing and why you love what you're doing and wanting to progress and be the best that you can be in that area. And so I think it's taken time. We're still getting there, but that's been a big thing for myself.
Mhm,
And I think also just wanting to make the most of every experience. Kind of like I said,
mhm,
I guess very early on in our conversation, it's just feeling like I owe it to my younger self to see what I'm capable of and wanting to
mhm,
see just how far we can take it in this sport, in a job circumstance, and in whatever. So
mhm. It's
that's yeah.
it's interesting when you talk about that balance piece and a person who likes to be busy, and I'm very much like that too. And I think at the age that I'm at now, I've had to accept, I think, the realization that for me, that's always going to be a work in progress. Like it's always something that I could be doing better and I'm learning more about myself or I learn little things, but it's, I don't know that I will ever be a person where people say like, "Oh, she does that really well." And I've learned that that's okay. It doesn't mean that you don't wanna work on it because that's healthy,
Yeah.
but I think I'm stopping to strive to always look like someone else.
And that is oh gosh, and that's so beautiful because I
Mm,
mean, there's a very famous quote, "Comparison is the thief of joy," but I think it
yes.
also I feel like it can just take so much away from your own journey and your personal experience and knowing that you are an individual, you're different from anybody else, and that's what makes everything you have to offer so valuable and so important is your different life experiences, is who you are, at your very core and what your passions are and what drives you. And I think I mean, especially when I was younger, I definitely was someone who compared themselves a lot to other people,
Mm,
and that was a big thing that I also had to overcome, so I feel you very deeply on this, and I think it can be both motivating and difficult in that regard when you surround
mm,
yourself with so many like-minded people because you see exactly what you want to build upon and replicate, but you also have to find that balance of being able to do it in the best way where you will succeed, where you get to play on your strengths
mm,
and, find a way to, like, find that success, but on your own terms.
mhm.
So it's important process.
Yeah, that's really good advice. When you look at like the role you play in a sport like this and even just being an athlete and a woman, right, these are often male dominated environments, and you know that I work in a male dominated environment, and a lot of our listeners will too. You're often breaking glass ceilings. Like what advice do you have from your own experience that you would give to women who are in those kinds of rooms?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Hmm, I think for myself, when I look back on, I guess, the experiences that I've had, the journey that I've been on, I think that as a woman in a sport that was for so long solely a male sport, hammer
Mhm.
throwing, is a sport that is changing every single day, within itself and also changing in the minds of spectators and fans and viewers as well with what their idea of being a female athlete should look like and should be, and, how you should present yourself. Like, I think
Mhm.
in a sport that's constantly changing so much, I think I've had to really accept, like, within myself that in a space that is so male dominated, it is not like a you being there is not a what's the word I'm looking for? Like you deserve to be there.
Mhm.
And I think that it's not like a
Like an
it's not
either
an
or.
act
It's
of
not like pitting
goodwill.
people against each other.
Yeah,
Do you
and it's
mean?
not
Yeah.
an act of goodwill that you've been invited to be at the table. Like, you deserve to be at the table. You are at the
Mhm.
table, and you need to absolutely, like, accept that and not like, you should not accept anything less than that.
Right.
That is the standard. That is the literally the base standard is that everyone is included in this conversation and that you are just out there and you are working to be your best self. And I think now at a point where social media is so much is like so prevalent, I think in well, in every area, I guess, of our society, but I think that there is a role that you can play in helping to change the minds of those who look at your field and help change their perception of it as well. I think
Mhm.
that for so many of us throwers, so many of us like female throwers, you are placed in a position, I think whether you want to be or not, even though it's a very big honor for you to be in that position of, I guess, showcasing what it means to be a strong woman, a powerful woman, and
Mhm.
a woman who is working every single day to change the landscape of what her sport looks like. And it's something that you, I think, can really take the reins on and showcase the very best parts of it and also the parts that need to be changed.
Yes.
And bringing the conversation back to those focuses. So I feel like I said a lot of things and also just said nothing. So we'll say just you deserve to be at the table and part of the conversation. But that you being there also, I think it's important to remember, helps pave the way for other people to come after you and build upon your progress. And I think it's amazing knowing that you can be part of that sort of process and that development and in sort of laying the foundation, laying that path to move forward for the women who come
Mhm.
after you. Like, whether
Mhm.
you think you are or not, you are helping to pave the way.
Yes. I think that's so true what you shared there, Cameron, and I see that a lot. Just by, being a leader, succeeding in what you do, by being good at what you do, you're you're unintentionally even doing that, right? And I see that in business and stuff all the time and people coming to me for advice and it's like sometimes you think like am I that person that people are coming to and it's like yeah, you are. And
Hell yeah, you are.
right? And like so many women were ahead of you and paved that way and then you're making it easier for all the women kind of coming up behind you and it's very very cool and that's part of the why I'm so passionate about women don't do that, right? It is to see people and women in roles that aren't traditionally viewed for women, like you throwing a hammer. And by you doing it and me being able to talk to you and showcase you, more young women will see that that's possible. And even women my age can learn from your advice and experience because you've done incredible things. And I just think that's so interesting.
Thank you. And I think that every woman in their field plays a very important role in laying that foundation. And I think one of the craziest moments that I've experienced in my career, truly, but one that I think genuinely brought me to tears was someone reached out to me and they said, "Hey, like we like my daughter and I watched you at Worlds, we watched you at the Olympics, and we had never really heard a hammer throw, but we thought it was so cool. We actually found our local club and my daughter's about to start her first practice in hammer." And I it was just the craziest sort
Yeah.
of moment in thinking that me just loving the sport, being involved in the sport, me being a hammer throw, like it matters. Like I
Mhm.
think it was this weird, like crazy realization that what I'm doing matters. And
Yes.
thinking that it introduced one girl to this sport that's changed my life
Yeah.
so much, and thinking hoping that it can do the same thing for her, and
Mhm. I mean,
it's
you
just
right? It's amazing. You think about soccer in Canada, right? And about what Team Canada has been able to do and how much soccer has grown for young girls. Like it's right? And you are that for your sport as well, or even just for athletics in general, right? And especially for strong girls that maybe don't look the same as what you might think a sprinter should look like or something, right? And there's a place for you in athletics, I think
and
is
it's
really
very
important.
it is, and it's very humbling to know, I think
Mm,
that there's so many people who might have the chance to find, like, one of the greatest passions and loves of their life, because of just the accessibility and being able to see it, knowing that it's possible. I think it just yeah, it is very it's incredible. It's amazing.
I love that. Well, I want to jump into the rapid fire questions as we close
Okay.
things off. So I want to ask you, can you share a rule you've broken that turned out to be a great decision?
Ooh, okay. I think in the last few years, this rule that I used to be very, very strict with my time. I used to think that I had to be, uh not completely take fun out of my life, I won't say that, but in a very, I guess, extreme way, be completely focused in on what I'm doing 100% of the time, which I am, but that meant that I also couldn't do anything else for fear that it would be like a distraction. I think accepting more fun activities and just having that sort of balance in my life, and I think recognizing that it is okay to also, like, have a life. Like, that sounds really sad, I think, when I say it, but I think when you're trying to chase your dream and
Mm,
pursue your passions, it can be so hard to think that you deserve to have time off or that you deserve to do these other things that aren't focused on your goal, and I think
mm,
having that, like, knowing that and holding that so deeply within me, um, and having that sort of as a standard when I finally sort of moved past it with the help of, like, some of my friends, and even my coach at one point was like, "Please, please, God, like, go do something." Go to a concert, like, go have a picnic, go to a book do anything.
yeah,
Was when I finally was able to feel a lot more free and even get better recovery and just
yeah.
live my life fully outside of what I'm doing, be more of, like, a whole person.
Yes, I think that's great advice, especially for yeah, any woman, because we do that, right? And we think like, oh, we have to be so narrowed in, and yet it can make you enjoy your life more fully and actually be better at the thing that you're doing by doing that. Who's a woman who continually inspires you?
This is so easy. My mom, no shame. I am literally the most proud to say that answer because that woman has done everything possible in her life to let me do the things that I do. She single-handedly, like, she raised me, she took us out of homelessness. Like, this woman has done everything possible to give me the best life that she could, and she's my rock. She's the person I turn to, for everything, and I love her so much. So, I think it makes me so proud to be able to say my mom as my
Yeah.
answer. She's
I love
yeah.
that, and it's so Cameron, like, I knew you were gonna say that, and you can be proud of yourself because you've been very clear about that, because when you read about you and you watch clips about you, it's like Cameron and her mom, she loves her mom. Like, I'm like, you
Mom
go.
forever.
Yeah, yeah. As a mom, I approve. What's one book that has significantly impacted your wisdom or perspective?
Okay, so that's a great question, and it's very hard because I literally have the biggest bookshelf that's completely full of books. A lot of them I have yet to read. Um, I think the oh gosh. Oh no, wait, Stephanie, you gave me such a hard question. Okay, let me think. I think the last book that really the last, we'll say, not complete fantasy book that I read, we'll just say fiction. I read Circe by I think Madeline Miller, and that book I think was very beautiful in how it portrayed, I guess, what it means to be human, what it means to persist and to keep living and to keep to keep on going even if the future is unclear, even if you maybe don't even know what the next step is, but to continue forward in everything that you do. That book
Mm.
made me cry. If I'm gonna go complete fantasy, emotional damage, I read Throne of Glass because it's my best friend's like one of her favorite series. And yes, it is like fantasy, but that series destroyed me. And
Oh.
I will forever have a special place in my heart for it.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I
Well,
don't
sometimes
I don't
you
read a
need
lot.
some books that are don't make you think too much, especially when you're so focused on your athletics, right? Sometimes you just need a break. And to be honest,
Some of
I
my
read a
favorite.
lot more of those like really thoughtful books when I was younger, and now I mostly read crime because I'm like, I just want a
Really?
story, right?
Have you read
Like I
The
don't
Silent Patient?
no, no.
Ooh, that could be your next. It's like crime, but it's also sort of a thriller. There's a lot going on. I'll send you the name of it and the author after.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Cameron. It's been a joy to get to know you better and so much good advice and stories for folks.
Oh my gosh. No, thank you so much for having me on. This is
Thank
such a
you.
pleasure. You are so lovely
Oh,
and
thank you.
I fantastic questions. I appreciate everything.
Thanks for joining us on Women Don't Do That. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating or review. Connect with us on Instagram at Women Don't Do That and visit our website www.womendon'tdothat.com for more details. Join our Patreon to support our work. Find all of the links in the show notes. Remember, you have the power to transform your what ifs into let's go. Together, let's redefine your possible. Until next time. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Women Don't Do That, Stephanie Mitten, or affiliated brands.